Hey guys, it's Galaxy and welcome to the camera comparison between Samsung Galaxy S22 and brand new Apple iPhone 14 Pro.
And before you write that the S22 costs about half the price of the iPhone, let me say I know. And this is what actually makes this comparison extremely interesting, because all of those so-called Pro phones I consider way too expensive. Without further ado, let's see how well the S22 can hold up. Beginning with landscapes, in the first picture I can see a slight difference in HDR strength and color science between the two. Although this Lexus is more exposed on the S22, the colors seem a bit off in comparison with the iPhone, which is a tad darker but probably more accurate here. Pretty much the same case over here. It seems that the S22 comes out with too much of a blue color tone, and looking closely at the road and cars, unfortunately, despite decent lighting conditions, I can spot some noise probably related to that stronger HDR. At this point it may look as if I'm painting the image that the S22 is much worse, but this cannot be farther from the truth. In this one, both in the ultra-wide and wide-angle mode, I prefer the Samsung because of the extra information in the sky area and overall more pleasing colors in comparison with the iPhone. Other times, in less complicated scenes, both phones perform equally solid, to the point you may think twice about the difference in relation to the price to value ratio. Though once again there are some differences as mentioned in the HDR area. Here honestly I would prefer to see something in between the two. The S22 is almost too bright both in highlights and shadows, whereas the iPhone exaggerated the sunset, looking a bit too dark and dramatic. And frankly, often it's not so easy to say which one is objectively better. That said, I'm quite impressed by Samsung. Looks like they've done their homework throughout those years, because the color science and HDR are tuned pretty well, and this becomes tough competition at this point. And I couldn't always say that in the past. Now let's take a look at the zoom abilities. With the iPhone you get 2x and 3x native zoom option in the menu. The first uses a central portion of the main camera sensor, and the second consists of a dedicated telephoto module. For the sake of this comparison, we will focus on the 3x telephoto on both phones. And despite both of them being 3x options, you get a bit different focal lengths, 77mm on the iPhone and 69mm on the Samsung. It's worth to mention, however, that the latter provides with a faster aperture. The final output is slightly better on the S22 in my opinion, although I am not sure if it's a matter of HDR tuning, a bit higher amount of details, or both, but pictures from Samsung look more natural and defined to me. Moving to some close-ups, first I have to mention one major bummer of the 14 Pro, the long focusing distance of the main lens. That is how close you will get before the phone switches to the macro mode, and the problem with this is that it will use the ultra-wide angle module. So as you can notice, the results are nothing like from the main sensor. Just look at this massive difference in detail and depth of field. Samsung wins hands down. In this picture of the statue, let's zoom in and check out the level of detail, and it appears they are pretty similar. Going further, in this case I can spot slightly more sharpening coming from the iPhone. Other than that, the level of detail seems once again comparable. Now let's get into the crop on the soldering iron. Looking at the label, this time it looks more accurate on the S22. Don't get me wrong, both pictures are solid and the level of detail is again pretty much the same, but less contrast and less sharpening makes the Samsung look more natural. And final verification, by the way, who remembers those? The good old Beat Solo HD, or should I say box of the replica. Anyway, all of my previous points seem to be confirmed. The S22 is more natural thanks to lower contrast and more balanced out sharpening. And honestly, I really dig that look. It's sort of funny because I remember this approach of both companies to be exactly the opposite just a few years ago. Checking out the video quality in 4K, at first glance both phones look very nice, but pausing this video for a minute, look at the difference in the level of detail. This tree looks noticeably sharper and more defined on the iPhone 14 Pro. That is also the case for pretty much everything in this scene, which by the way was not easy to handle because of lots of things going on. And I am far from telling Samsung is terrible, but the difference in quality is there and iPhone wins hands down in my opinion. Also, the 14 Pro reveals more information in the shadows and there is overall just much less artifacts and noise when moving, perhaps indicating a higher bitrate. Jogging a little, the footage from iPhone appears to be more stable, however I'm not sure if you can notice that Samsung appears to provide an advantage of not having those slightly annoying exposure jumps. Though even bigger difference in quality is found in the ultra-wide angle mode, the iPhone footage is much more detailed and sharper, and in this regard there is really no argue with that. Dimming the lights a bit, in the first picture I can see warmer color tones coming from the Samsung and unfortunately more noise looking at this black BMW's cabinet. So what I think is happening is that the iPhone intentionally counteracts unfavorable indoor lighting conditions, cranking the color temperature. Although it may not always be the most accurate approach, in those examples it indeed does a good job. On top of that, there is again less noise in those pictures and I wonder, is it because of the difference in processing or the new larger sensor in the iPhone? Moving to the most interesting, the night mode. So other than Samsung having slightly more exposure, not a huge difference in the ultra-wide angle mode. But in the standard mode, the S22 is noticeably brighter and the road looks sort of more detailed. Though taking a look at those energy lines in the right corner, the iPhone appears to have a bit of an advantage in the noise processing again. Here, much more pleasing color tones on the S22, both in ultra-wide and wide-angle mode. The S22 is once again brighter and I prefer its color reproduction. Both are very solid, but to me the S22 was more accurate and balanced in regard to the exposure. iPhone just comes out slightly too reddish sometimes, though on the other hand it may display an advantage when it comes to the noise processing. In conclusion, even though the price gap between those two phones is quite large, the comparison reveals there is not as big of a difference in terms of the camera performance as one may expect. In my honest opinion, the S22 is a great alternative, providing more natural details, better quality macro, better telephoto results and very solid night mode. iPhone on the other hand is without a doubt massively better when it comes to video quality and offers slightly better noise processing. So I think the buying decision should mostly comes down to how much you value those filmmaking abilities. But be sure to let me know what do you think about the differences between those two. Consider subscribing for coming camera comparison between the iPhone 14 Pro and the good old Samsung Galaxy S10. See you in the next one. Peace.